Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. In these unprecedented times, getting the resources needed or even just feeling connected can be incredibly challenging for rural communities. To get a better sense of how smaller Vermont communities are coping and coming together during this difficult time, we're reaching out to the Executive Director of the Vermont Council on Rural Development, Paul Costello. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us.
Thank you, Fran. It's great to be here.
From Montpelier. So your organization is completely changing its direction and focus for the virus.
Well, we're used to bringing 200-300 people together to rally and say, you know, what do we stand for? What are our priorities? How do we work together? Unfortunately, the virus has set priorities for all of us, and we're working with people throughout the state who are putting themselves on the line to prepare, to do what is in their power to help their neighbors, and also to think about what we're going to need to do to build an economic recovery in the wake of the immediate challenge that we face.
Right, exactly. Well, you know, it can be eerie going downtown these days. You know, typically bustling streets are quite empty. You sent me a couple of photos of Montpelier with nobody there, especially this time of year. It's very unusual. So what are things that you're doing to assure that towns can remain vibrant and survive this pandemic?
Well, I think that a lot of people are worried about it, and not just for the downtown businesses, though those are really hard hit, but for our tourism sector, for farmers, for manufacturers. Really, the whole economy is affected by this. I think a lot of people are looking forward to how do we get back to business and how are we going to rally and support our local businesses. I think most Vermonters are deeply concerned and want to be very supportive of their businesses. So they're going out and they're buying gift certificates, or they're doing takeout with restaurants and so forth now. But I think there's going to be a lot of work to come. One of the things that we've seen is that throughout communities in Vermont, groups have sprung forth to provide mutual aid to each other. They're looking at the larger challenges to businesses and to the community, but they're also really looking neighbor to neighbor at what can be done to support people who are maybe more vulnerable, maybe who are on quarantine, maybe who need someone to shop for them or pick up medicines for them. And this kind of mutual aid work has been springing up from the grassroots throughout the state of Vermont for the last several weeks.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So how do they get started, and how can someone get involved with mutual aid groups? Because they are all over the state now popping up.
They are, and they're really different. You know, some like the Northeast Kingdom Collaborative, led by Catherine Sims, has deliberately helped to frame and support those groups throughout the Northeast Kingdom. Others like the Space on Main group that came from Monique Priestley and her team in Bradford have grown and have connected all sorts of working groups in that community to be effective. And I know you're going to have Rebecca Sanborn Stone from Bethel, who's just a terrific local heroine who is helping to bring people together and build some united action to support the community.
So I know you have on your website that we'll make sure we show at the end of the show a whole list of things that are happening. I'm sure that there are some holes, but you can find out who these community leaders are and connect with them. Is that how it would work if someone wants to get involved?
Yeah, we will. We're happy to connect people to different groups in their region. If you're a new group that's formed in a small town and you're not in the list, you can sign in. We'll invite you to coordinative calls. This isn't really a top-down process, but we're trying to be useful to help people connect. If you're in the Northeast Kingdom, we can help you connect with the collaborative and so forth. Throughout the state, there are different sort of nodes of activity that are taking leadership. But the website also shares sort of protocols. You know, this is work that you have to be very careful around. We're in a time where a first principle is to do no harm, that we need to be very careful in following protocols, you know, looking at the Department of Health website, paying attention to the governor's sense of, what are the appropriate practices at a particular time and following those rigorously. But on the other hand, there's lots of room for community energy and a lot of room for community members to support each other, sometimes even in the virtual realm. So a lot of people are calling their neighbors or Skyping or Zooming to connect with their neighbors to make sure that people are okay. And all of that's so important in a time of distancing, that we stay close together and work together for everyone's well-being.
Fantastic. And are there funds available for grassroots in these mutual aid groups? These aren't part of the local government or a nonprofit. So is there financial help for these groups?
Well, everyone's asking that question, and no one knows what the stimulus is going to do around this arena. But right now, the New England Grassroots Environmental Fund has some small grants. You don't have to be a nonprofit to receive a grant from them. The Vermont Community Foundation is building a fund right now to be able to support work around the virus. And people locally are crowdsourcing to develop to make things happen. So it's pretty diverse. We're going to be looking at what best practices happen town to town and region to region and putting them together for groups to be able to learn from each other and copy what works the best. And so people who are interested in this should also drop in through vtrural.org to find links and be able to follow what's going on.
Great. And I think it's very important that people who's being left behind and not accessing services, and how we can keep in touch with those people.
Well, it's really true. I mean, you think about who's most vulnerable today, and there are groups in Montpelier and Barrie and other towns that are deeply concerned about homeless folks. There are people who may be senior citizens who have been homebound even before the virus came, who need support. In some towns like Craftsbury, they've gone through and considered who needs support and who's in that vulnerable category, who's had physical conditions in advance of this that needs to be specially protected or supported. And so there's a lot of neighbor to neighbor connection around that, and these mutual aid groups are trying to help coordinate and support that kind of work town to town throughout the state.
Great. And it seems that, a lot of cooperation is required from government, business, even schools, and the public to achieve the goals of even social distancing and making sure that those things are happening. Is there a silver lining found in this multi-sector cooperation that can help as we hopefully move beyond this?
Well, it's a tough situation, and I know people talk about silver linings. I think there are side benefits, and one of them is that I think we're at a period where people are feeling a great deal of compassion and concern for their neighbors, and there's a strong sense that we want to make sure that we have the social and economic infrastructure to be resilient in the future. And so I think that there's a lot of messages in the challenge that we're facing, and a lot of local work that's being done to find best practices that will survive and go beyond the epidemic. But I think the work that we're going to need to do to reconstruct and support the future of our economy in the wake of this is also going to be looking at resilience around climate change preparedness, as well as climate action to build businesses that will answer and reduce carbon and so forth. And so I think that we are in a bit of a crucible with this in terms of the future of Vermont's economy and how we work together. And I'm confident in that, because I think that Vermonters are strong, that Vermonters stand together. The governor is using Vermont Strong these days, and I think we all can use that. I think it's a time where we pitch in to support the common good.
It harkens back to Tropical Storm Irene. So another initiative of VCRD is the working landscape. How are you finding that Vermonters who work the land and in our forests are doing right now, and what their specific needs might be?
Well, it's really tough. It's really tough. A lot of folks are looking at planting right now, and they are struggling for capital. They they're looking at how they're going to be able to distribute when farmers markets may not be allowed to go forward. Dairy farms are really struggling. The milk price is has collapsed a bit in the last couple of weeks, and that's devastating for people. So it's a really tough time. We've been in touch with our congressional delegation and with the legislature, encouraging them to do what's possible to support the farm and forest sector. The legislature and governor have both taken initiative to add funding to the Working Lands Enterprise Fund that seeds creative innovation for the development of farm forest businesses. But everything's up in the air right now with the budget in the legislature. And our Senator Leahy's staff and Bernie Sanders and Congressman Welch, they're all working hard to do their best for Vermont farmers and forest products and local businesses in the stimulus packages. Those packages have big numbers on them, but they're not articulated down to how they're going to be operationalized around the working landscape. So they're working on that, and we're trying to encourage them to have the dollars hit the ground for local businesses.
And you're probably helping prioritize where some of those dollars go. So we just have a minute. Your best practices, what you're seeing is what's really important. I think you said earlier, how can we support local the best we can?
Yes. I'm not sure. Is there a question there?
Well, I guess that's it. And let's make sure that everybody knows your website. It's www.vtrural.org. Mm-hmm. Can they also call? Is that okay to give your number out?
Yeah, they can call 223-6091, or they can go to info@vtrural.org. And we'll sort those calls. We'll get someone to call you back, or we'll connect you with a local person who's interested.
Fantastic.
We'll also invite you into calls so that we can keep coordinated with you as things go forward.
Okay, Paul Costello of the Vermont Council on Rural Development, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Fran.
And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard.